The selfless gesture. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the streets of Chicago as Marcus, a 14-year-old black boy, made his way home from school. His backpack, heavy with second-hand books, hung from his shoulders. His well-worn sneakers scraped against the cracked sidewalk as he avoided puddles from the morning rain. Marcus was used to the chaos of the city, the honking cars, shouting pedestrians, and the hum of distant trains, but today he was lost in thought. His mother's strained voice from the morning lingered in his mind. "Marcus, make sure to be home early and finish your homework before I get back," she had said, her eyes filled with exhaustion. She worked 2 jobs to keep a roof over their heads, and her tired smile was a testament to the sacrifices she made daily. Marcus, determined not to add to her burdens, always tried to help in any way he could, whether it was washing dishes or finding odd jobs after school. The bus stop was crowded when he arrived. As usual, office workers, students, and families with strollers jostled for space under the small shelter. The number 47 bus finally screeched to a halt, and Marcus climbed aboard, gripping the handrails tightly. The vehicle was already packed, and the smell of sweat and damp clothes filled the air. He squeezed into an empty seat near the back, grateful for a moment to rest his aching legs. As the bus trundled through the city streets, it made frequent stops, each time growing more crowded. At a busy intersection, Marcus noticed a woman struggling to board. She was visibly pregnant, her face pale and her steps slow. She clutched a small handbag in one hand and used the other to steady herself against the doorframe. Her business attire, though neat, seemed out of place amidst the chaos of the crowded bus. Marcus watched as she scanned the rows of seated passengers, her eyes searching for an empty spot. Most people avoided her gaze, either too engrossed in their phones or pretending not to notice her discomfort. Marcus felt a pang of guilt. His mother, who was 7 months pregnant, often came home late from work, her swollen feet barely able to fit into her shoes. He couldn't imagine her being ignored like this. Without hesitation, Marcus stood up and gestured for the woman to take his seat. "Ma'am, you can sit here," he said, his voice soft but clear. The woman looked at him, surprised, and hesitated for a moment before accepting. "Thank you, young man," she said with a grateful smile, lowering herself into the seat. Her face relaxed as she leaned back, clearly relieved. "It's no problem," Marcus replied, holding onto a nearby pole for support. The bus jolted forward, and he staggered slightly but held his balance. His backpack felt heavier now, but he didn't mind. As the bus continued its journey, Marcus noticed the woman occasionally glancing at him. Her expression was a mix of curiosity and gratitude. She finally spoke, breaking the silence between them. "What's your name, young man?" she asked. "Marcus," he replied simply. "Well, Marcus, you've got good manners," she said warmly. "Your parents must be proud of you." Marcus shrugged, a shy smile spreading across his face. "I just thought you needed the seat more than I did," he said. The bus ride continued, and eventually the woman's stop arrived. She stood up carefully and looked at Marcus one last time. "Thank you again, Marcus. You've made my day a little easier," she said before stepping off the bus. As the bus pulled away, Marcus couldn't shake the strange feeling that lingered. It wasn't the first time he had given up his seat to someone in need, but something about this interaction felt different. He dismissed the thought and focused on getting home. When Marcus arrived at his apartment, the familiar sight of peeling paint and rusted fire escapes greeted him. He climbed the stairs to the 4th floor, his legs heavy with fatigue. Inside, the small 2-room space was quiet as usual. His mother wouldn't be back until late, and the notes she had left on the kitchen table were the only reminders of her presence. He heated up a simple meal of rice and beans, the same dinner he'd had for the past 3 nights, and sat at the table. The weight of their struggles pressed down on him like the books in his bag. Yet he couldn't stop thinking about the woman on the bus. Her kind words replayed in his mind, and for some reason, they'd brought him a sense of pride. He didn't know it yet, But that single act of kindness was about to change his life in ways he could never have imagined. An unexpected visitor. The next day dawned like any other. Marcus woke early to the sound of his mother preparing for her first job of the day. The clinking of dishes and the hum of the small electric kettle were familiar sounds that comforted him, even though he knew they stemmed from her endless routine of work and sacrifice. "Morning, Mom," Marcus greeted as he shuffled into the kitchen, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. His mother looked up, her tired face softening into a smile. "Morning, sweetheart. There's some toast on the table. I'll be home late again tonight, so don't wait up for me," she said, hurriedly tying her hair back into a neat bun. Marcus nodded, silently noting the new lines etched on her face. "I'll get the laundry done and start dinner." "Don't worry about anything," he promised, reaching for the toast. Her eyes filled with pride and guilt all at once. "You're too good to me, Marcus," she said softly before planting a quick kiss on his forehead. "Now get ready for school. You don't want to miss the bus." After she left, Marcus went through his morning routine. As he laced up his worn sneakers, he couldn't shake a strange sense of anticipation. The memory of the pregnant woman from the bus lingered in his mind. Something about her gratitude and the way she had looked at him felt different. By the time school was over, Marcus had almost forgotten about it. He was busy calculating how much of his small savings he could use to help his mom with the overdue electric bill. His focus was broken when he heard a familiar honk outside the school gates. It was the same bus he rode every day, and it was packed as usual. Marcus slipped inside, navigating the crowd until he found his usual spot near the back. The ride home was uneventful, and when Marcus arrived at his apartment building, he climbed the stairs as quickly as his aching legs would allow. The moment he stepped into the apartment, however, he froze. A sleek black car was parked just outside the building. Its glossy exterior and tinted windows were a stark contrast to the dilapidated surroundings. Marcus stared at it through the window for a moment, confused. Cars like that didn't belong in his neighborhood. His first thought was that it might belong to a social worker or someone from the landlord's office, here to deliver bad news. But when the car door opened, Marcus's heart skipped a beat. The woman from the bus stepped out. She was dressed in a sharp, tailored suit, and her confident stride suggested she was someone important. Marcus felt a jolt of nervous energy as he watched her approach the building. What was she doing here? How did she even know where he lived? Before he could decide what to do, there was a knock at the door. Marcus hesitated for a moment, then opened it cautiously. The woman smiled warmly at him, her hands clasped in front of her. "Hello, Marcus," she said. "I hope I'm not intruding." Marcus blinked in surprise. No, ma'am. Is everything okay?" Her smile widened. "Everything's fine. I just wanted to talk to you for a moment. May I come in?" Marcus hesitated. The apartment was small and cluttered, and he felt a pang of embarrassment as he glanced around. Still, he stepped aside and gestured for her to enter. She walked in gracefully, her eyes scanning the room with an unreadable expression. "Thank you," she said, taking a seat on the worn couch. "I'm sorry to show up unannounced, but I couldn't stop thinking about what you did for me yesterday." Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "It wasn't a big deal. You needed the seat more than I did." "It was a big deal to me," she insisted. "Most people wouldn't have bothered. They would have ignored me, just like they did on that bus. But you didn't." Marcus shrugged, unsure of how to respond. "I just did what I thought was right," he said quietly. The woman nodded, her expression softening. "That's exactly why I'm here. You see, Marcus, I've been through some tough times myself. I know what it's like to feel invisible, to struggle just to make it through the day. And when someone shows kindness, real kindness, it can change everything." Marcus felt his cheeks flush. He wasn't used to being praised like this. "I didn't do it for anything in return," he said quickly, worried she might think he had ulterior motives. "I know," she said. "That's what makes it even more meaningful." There was a brief pause before she continued. I want to help you, Marcus. I don't know much about your situation, but I can see that you and your family could use a little support. Marcus frowned, unsure of what she meant. Help us? How? She reached into her handbag and pulled out a small envelope, holding it out to him. This is for you and your mom. Consider it a thank you for your kindness. Marcus stared at the envelope, his heart racing. He didn't want to take it. It felt wrong, like charity, but the look in her eyes was sincere. Slowly, he reached out and accepted it. Thank you, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. The woman smiled again and stood up. You're a good kid, Marcus. Don't ever lose that. And if you ever need anything, don't hesitate to reach out. She handed him a business card with her name and number before heading toward the door. Marcus watched her leave, still holding the envelope in his hand. As soon as the door closed behind her, he tore it open. Inside was a check for $5,000. His knees went weak, and he sank onto the couch, staring at the check in disbelief. The number seemed impossible, like something out of a dream. For a moment, he couldn't breathe. Then his thoughts turned to his mother. The bills, the groceries, the repairs their apartment desperately needed. This money could change everything. Marcus's mind raced with possibilities, but one thing was clear. The woman's gesture was more than just a thank you. It was a lifeline, a second chance, and it had all started with a simple act of kindness. The gift that keeps giving. The next few days passed in a blur for Marcus. The envelope with the check remained tucked safely inside a book on his mother's modest bookshelf, hidden from view, but never far from his thoughts. He struggled with what to do next. Should he tell his mother? Should he deposit it secretly and use the money to pay the bills? Each option felt overwhelming. His mother, as usual, was too exhausted to notice his preoccupation. Her long hours and swollen feet consumed her energy, leaving little room for anything beyond survival. Marcus didn't want to add to her burdens, but the weight of his secret pressed on him. He decided to wait for the right moment. That Saturday, Marcus woke early, his heart pounding with nervous energy. He had finally made a decision. After a hurried breakfast of toast and leftover beans, he tucked the check and business card into his pocket and set off on foot toward the nearest bank. The card bore the name Sophia Winslow, followed by her title, CEO of Winslow Enterprises. The bank was located in a bustling part of the neighborhood, where street vendors sold everything from hot dogs to secondhand clothes. Marcus kept his head down, weaving through the crowd, the weight of the check burning a hole in his pocket. When he arrived at the bank, he hesitated before stepping inside. The air-conditioned interior felt worlds apart from the noisy, humid streets outside. He was greeted by a cheerful teller who, after hearing his request, ushered him into a small office. A neatly dressed banker introduced herself as Miss Calloway. Her friendly demeanor helped ease Marcus's nerves. "You're here to open a savings account. Is that correct?" she asked, smiling kindly. Marcus nodded, pulling the check from his pocket. "Yes, Mom. I'd like to deposit this." When Miss Calloway saw the amount, her eyebrows rose slightly, but she quickly masked her surprise. "That's a very generous check," she said, studying it. "May I ask where it came from?" "It's a gift," Marcus explained, unsure of how much he should say. "From someone who wanted to help my family." The banker nodded, her expression softening. "That's wonderful. Let's get everything set up for you." For the next hour, Marcus sat in the office as Miss Calloway walked him through the process. She explained how his savings account would work and the importance of budgeting. By the time he left the bank, he felt a strange mix of relief and responsibility. The money was safe now, but the real challenge was deciding how to use it. When Marcus returned home, his mother was sitting at the kitchen table, flipping through a stack of bills. Her brow was furrowed, and her fingers tapped nervously against the table. The sight made Marcus's stomach churn. He hated seeing her like this, worn down by worry. "Hey, Mom," he said, setting his backpack down. "Can I talk to you for a second?" She looked up, her eyes softening. "Of course, sweetheart. What's on your mind?" Marcus hesitated, his heart racing. He hadn't planned exactly what to say, but he knew he couldn't keep the secret any longer. "Something happened a few days ago," he began. "You remember that lady I told you about? The one I gave my seat to on the bus?" His mother nodded slowly, her expression curious. "Yes, I remember. What about her?" "Well, she showed up here. She said she wanted to thank me for what I did. And she gave me this." Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out the business card, sliding it across the table. "Her name's Sophia Winslow. She's kind of a big deal, I think." His mother picked up the card, her eyes narrowing as she read it. "CEO of Winslow Enterprises," she murmured. "Marcus, this can't be real. Why would someone like her come all the way here just to thank you?" "She said it was because I reminded her of something important," Marcus explained. "She gave me a check, Mom, for $5,000. His mother froze, her eyes widening. $5,000, she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. "Marcus, you're joking." "I'm not," he insisted. "I deposited it at the bank this morning. It's in a savings account now." For a moment, his mother simply stared at him, her expression a mix of shock and disbelief. Then tears filled her eyes. "Marcus," she whispered, reaching across the table to take his hand. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "I wasn't sure what to do," he admitted, "but I thought about it, and I think we can use the money to pay off the bills and get you some rest. You've been working so hard, Mom. You deserve a break." His mother shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "Sweetheart, this money, it's a blessing. But it's not just about the bills. It's about what you did to earn it. You showed kindness and selflessness, and that's worth more than any amount of money." They sat in silence for a while, holding hands as the enormity of the situation sank in. For the first time, in a long time, the future didn't feel so daunting. Over the next few weeks, life began to change for Marcus and his mother. The first thing they did was pay off the overdue bills, lifting a heavy burden from their shoulders. Marcus insisted on using part of the money to buy his mother a pair of supportive shoes for her swollen feet and a few maternity essentials she had been putting off. With some of the remaining funds, Marcus convinced his mother to cut back on her hours at the diner. She was hesitant at first, but Marcus reminded her of the doctor's warnings about her high-risk pregnancy. "You need to take care of yourself," he told her firmly. "It's not just about the baby. It's about you too." Reluctantly, she agreed. Her reduced schedule allowed her to rest more, and the change was almost immediate. Her energy improved, and the dark circles under her eyes began to fade. One afternoon, Marcus decided to call the number on Sophia Winslow's card. He wanted to thank her properly for what she had done for his family. When she answered, her voice was warm and familiar. "Marcus," she said, clearly recognizing him. "I'm so glad you called." "I just wanted to say thank you," he said earnestly. "What you did for us, it's changed everything." Sophia chuckled softly. "You did the hard part, Marcus. You showed kindness when no one else did. I just wanted to make sure you and your family had the chance to thrive." They spoke for a while, and by the end of the call, Marcus felt a new sense of connection. Sophia wasn't just a wealthy stranger. She was someone who believed in him. And that belief gave him the confidence to dream bigger than he ever had before, a path to new beginnings. Marcus's call with Sophia Winslow marked a turning point in his life. Though they had only spoken briefly, her words stayed with him. "You have the potential to achieve great things, Marcus. Don't let anything hold you back." For the first time in years, Marcus felt like the weight of his circumstances wasn't insurmountable. With the immediate financial pressure eased, he began to focus on the future, not just for himself, but for his mother and the sibling who would soon arrive. A week after the call, Marcus came home from school to find his mother in an unusually cheerful mood. She was humming a soft tune as she folded laundry in their cramped living room. The sight brought a smile to his face. It had been months, if not years, since he'd seen her this lighthearted. "You're in a good mood," Marcus said, dropping his backpack by the door. His mother looked up, her face glowing despite her obvious fatigue. "I have some good news," she said, gesturing for him to sit. "The diner manager offered me a part-time position with better pay and fewer hours. He said he noticed how hard I've been working and thought I deserved a break." Marcus's eyebrows shot up. "That's amazing, Mom. You definitely deserve it." She smiled, reaching over to pat his hand. "It's all thanks to you, Marcus. I wouldn't have been able to cut back on my hours if it weren't for that money. And I think I'll actually have time to take care of myself and the baby now." Marcus felt a surge of pride, but he didn't let it linger. There was still more to be done. "That's great, Mom. Maybe now we can start saving up for the future, too." His mother nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Yes, the future. We've been surviving for so long, Marcus. It feels strange to think about what's next. But I want more for you, for us. And I think we can make it happen." That weekend, Marcus decided to use some of his free time to visit the library. He had always loved books. They were an escape from the harsh realities of his life. But today, he wasn't looking for fiction. He was on a mission to learn. With a small notebook in hand, he scoured the shelves for anything that could help him understand how to manage money, plan for the future, and maybe even create opportunities for himself and his family. "Excuse me," he said to the librarian, a kind-looking woman with glasses perched on her nose. "Do you have any books on personal finance or starting a business?" The librarian's eyebrows lifted slightly in surprise, but she quickly smiled. "Of course. Follow me." She led him to a section filled with books on budgeting, entrepreneurship, and self-improvement. Marcus selected a few titles and settled into a quiet corner to read. He scribbled notes furiously, absorbing information about saving, investing, and the basics of starting a small business. One book in particular caught his attention. It was about young entrepreneurs who had turned simple ideas into successful ventures. As Marcus read their stories, he felt a spark of inspiration. The next Monday, Marcus found himself back on the phone with Sophia. This time, he wasn't calling just to thank her. He had an idea. "Hi, Ms. Winslow," he said nervously. "It's Marcus again. I hope I'm not bothering you." "Not at all," Sophia replied warmly. "What's on your mind?" "Well," Marcus began, hesitating for a moment before plunging ahead, "I've been thinking about how to make the most of the money you gave us. I want to help my mom, of course, but I also want to do something more, something that could help us long-term." Sophia's voice was filled with curiosity. "That's a wonderful mindset, Marcus. Do you have something specific in mind?" Marcus took a deep breath. "I was thinking about starting a small business. Nothing big, just something I can manage after school. I've been reading about kids who've done things like tutoring, selling handmade items, or running errands for people in their neighborhoods. I think I could do something like that." There was a brief pause on the other end of the line before Sophia spoke again. "Marcus, that's an incredible idea. Not only would it give you some extra income, but it would also teach you valuable skills. What kind of business are you thinking about?" "I'm not sure yet," Marcus admitted, "but I thought I could start by offering tutoring to kids in the neighborhood. I'm good at math, and a lot of parents might be willing to pay for extra help." Sophia's voice was enthusiastic. "That's a fantastic plan. And you know what? I'd like to help you get started. How about we meet for lunch this weekend? We can talk about your ideas in more detail." Marcus's heart raced. "Really? You'd do that?" "Of course," she said. "It's the least I can do for someone as hardworking and determined as you. Let's make it happen." That Saturday, Marcus met Sophia at a small cafe in a nicer part of town. He felt out of place in his simple jeans and t-shirt, but Sophia greeted him with the same warmth she had shown on the bus. She listened intently as he explained his plan, occasionally chiming in with suggestions. "You have a good head on your shoulders, Marcus," she said, tapping a pen against her notebook. "If you start small and stay focused, I have no doubt you'll succeed. And remember, you don't have to do it all alone. There are people who believe in you and want to see you thrive." By the end of their meeting, Marcus felt more confident than ever. Sophia had even offered to connect him with one of her colleagues who ran a nonprofit organization that provided resources to young entrepreneurs. Armed with her advice and encouragement, Marcus was ready to take the first step. Over the next month, Marcus threw himself into his new venture. With the help of a small loan from his savings account, he printed flyers advertising his tutoring services and distributed them around the neighborhood. To his surprise, the response was overwhelming. Parents began calling, eager to hire him to help their children with math and science. Marcus juggled his schoolwork with tutoring sessions, carefully managing his time to ensure he didn't fall behind. The extra income made a noticeable difference at home. Marcus was able to contribute to the household expenses, easing some of the burden on his mother. But more importantly, he felt a sense of purpose. He wasn't just surviving anymore, he was building something. One evening, as Marcus sat at the kitchen table reviewing his schedule for the week, his mother joined him. She placed a hand on his shoulder, her eyes filled with pride. "You've grown so much, Marcus," she said softly. "I don't know how I got so lucky to have a son like you." Marcus smiled, looking up at her. "You've always been my inspiration, Mom. Everything I do is because of you." As they sat together, the future no longer seemed like an impossible dream. It was within reach, and Marcus was determined to make the most of it, for himself, for his mother, and for the family they were creating. A ripple effect of kindness. Months passed, and Marcus's life began to take on a new rhythm. Between school, his tutoring business, and helping his mother prepare for the arrival of his sibling, his days were busier than ever. But for the first time, they were filled with hope rather than worry. The tutoring business was thriving. Word had spread about Marcus's patience and knack for breaking down complex problems, and he soon found himself with a steady stream of clients. The money he earned was used carefully. Some of it went toward household expenses, easing the financial burden on his mother. Another portion was saved for the future, and yet another portion was quietly set aside for something Marcus had been thinking about for weeks. It started with a boy named Diego, who lived a few floors down in their apartment building. Diego was a year younger than Marcus and often struggled in school. His parents worked long hours and couldn't afford a tutor, so Diego's grades had slipped. One day, Marcus overheard his mother talking to Diego's mother in the hallway. "I wish we could help him," Diego's mother said, her voice tinged with despair. "But between rent and bills, there's just no way. He's a smart kid. He just needs someone to guide him." That night, Marcus lay awake, thinking about Diego. He remembered all the times he had struggled with his own schoolwork, how alone he had felt without someone to help him. He had been fortunate enough to meet someone like Sophia Winslow, who had given him a chance to change his life. Now he realized he was in a position to do the same for someone else. The next day, Marcus knocked on Diego's door. When Diego answered, his face lit up with surprise. "Marcus, what's up?" "I was wondering if you'd like some help with your homework," Marcus said, holding up a textbook. "No charge, just if you want." Diego's eyes widened. "Seriously, you'd do that for me?" "Yeah," Marcus said with a shrug. "Why not? I've got some time before my next session, and I know how tough school can be." From that day on, Marcus began tutoring Diego for free. At first it was just an hour here and there, but as Diego's confidence grew, so did their sessions. Marcus helped him with math, science, and even history, tailoring each lesson to Diego's pace. Watching Diego's face light up when he solved a tough equation or understood a tricky concept brought Marcus a sense of fulfillment he hadn't expected. Diego wasn't the only one who noticed. Soon, other kids in the building began approaching Marcus, asking for help with their schoolwork. Many of them came from families who couldn't afford tutoring, and Marcus found himself offering free lessons to anyone who needed them. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about giving back, about creating the same ripple effect of kindness that Sofia had started in his life. One evening, as Marcus was finishing up a session with Diego, his mother called him into the living room. She was holding an envelope, her hands trembling slightly. "This came for you," she said, handing it over. Marcus opened the envelope and pulled out a letter. His eyes widened as he read the words. It was from a local community organization, one that Sofia had connected him with months earlier. The letter congratulated him on being selected as the recipient of a Youth Leadership Award, which came with a $2,000 scholarship. "Marcus," his mother said, her voice shaking with emotion. "This is incredible. A scholarship. For you." Marcus could hardly believe it himself. "I guess they heard about the tutoring," he said, still staring at the letter. "I didn't think it was a big deal." His mother placed her hands on his shoulders, her eyes brimming with tears. "What you're doing is more than a big deal, Marcus. You're changing lives." The award ceremony was held at a community center in the heart of the city. Marcus felt out of place in the borrowed suit his mother had carefully ironed for him. But when he stepped onto the stage to accept his award, the applause from the audience filled him with pride. As he looked out at the crowd, he spotted Sophia Winslow sitting in the front row, her face beaming with pride. After the ceremony, Sophia approached Marcus and his mother. "Marcus," she said warmly, shaking his hand. "You've come a long way since we first met. I couldn't have done it without you," Marcus said sincerely. "You believed in me when no one else did." Sophia smiled, glancing at Marcus's mother. "I think you had a strong foundation before I ever came along," she said, "and now you're building something extraordinary." The scholarship money gave Marcus even more opportunities to expand his tutoring business. He used part of it to buy supplies, new textbooks, whiteboards, and even a second-hand laptop. He also began offering group sessions at the community center, where he could help more kids at once. The sessions were free, and the turnout was better than he could have imagined. One day, as Marcus was packing up after a group session, Diego ran up to him, grinning from ear to ear. "Marcus, guess what? I got an A on my math test." Marcus smiled, ruffling Diego's hair. "That's awesome, man. I knew you could do it." Diego hesitated for a moment before adding, "And my mom said to tell you thanks. She said you're like a big brother to me." The words hit Marcus like a wave of warmth. He realized then that the ripple effect of kindness didn't just change lives. It built connections, strengthened communities, and created a legacy far greater than any one person. One evening, as Marcus and his mother sat together in their small living room, she placed a hand on his shoulder. "You've done so much for this family, Marcus," she said softly, "and for this neighborhood. I'm so proud of you." Marcus looked at her, his heart swelling with gratitude. "I couldn't have done it without you, Mom. You're the one who taught me what it means to care for others." As they sat together, the future felt brighter than ever. Marcus knew there would still be challenges ahead, but he also knew they could face them together. The ripple effect of kindness had only just begun, and he was determined to keep it going. Marcus's tutoring business grew steadily, but so did his commitment to helping others in the neighborhood who couldn't afford his services. It started small, just Diego and a few other kids from their building, but word of Marcus's generosity began to spread. Parents who were struggling financially often stopped him in the hallway or on the street to thank him for what he was doing. Some brought small tokens of appreciation, homemade cookies, a bottle of juice, or a simple thank you accompanied by a heartfelt smile. What Marcus didn't expect was how his small gesture would inspire others in his community to step up as well. A community comes together. One afternoon, after a particularly busy group tutoring session at the community center, Marcus was approached by Mrs. Latham, the elderly woman who managed the center. She had been watching him work with the kids, her eyes twinkling with pride. "Marcus," she said, her voice warm and inviting, "you're doing something truly special here. Have you thought about turning this into a bigger program?" Marcus blinked in surprise. "A program? I don't know. I mean, I'm just trying to help out where I can. Mrs. Latham smiled. That's how all great things start. But what you're doing could be so much more. You could organize these sessions into regular classes, recruit volunteers, and even apply for grants to fund supplies and expand your reach. The idea both excited and intimidated Marcus. He was just a kid. How could he run a program like that? But Mrs. Latham saw his hesitation and placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. You don't have to do it alone, she said. The community is here to support you. We all see the good you're doing, Marcus, and we want to help. The first meeting. A week later, Mrs. Latham helped Marcus organize a meeting at the community center. Flyers were handed out, and word spread quickly about Marcus's idea to create a formal tutoring program. The turnout exceeded his expectations. Parents, teachers, and even a few local business owners showed up, eager to hear more. Marcus stood at the front of the room, nervously clutching the stack of notes. Public speaking wasn't his strong suit, but as he looked out at the sea of supportive faces, he felt a surge of confidence. Thank you all for coming, he began, his voice steady. When I started tutoring kids in my building, I never imagined it would turn into something like this. I just wanted to help a few people who were struggling like I've struggled before. But now I see that this could be something bigger, something that helps not just a few kids, but the whole community. He paused, glancing at his mother, who sat in the front row, her face glowing with pride. I want to start a program that offers free tutoring to kids who need it, no matter their circumstances. But I can't do it alone. I'll need volunteers, resources, and ideas from all of you. The room erupted into applause. People began raising their hands, offering their skills and support. A retired teacher volunteered to help train tutors. A local bookstore owner pledged to donate books and supplies. A single mother offered to organize schedules and handle logistics. Marcus couldn't believe the outpouring of generosity. By the end of the meeting, the program had a name: the Bright Futures Initiative. Sophia's role. True to her word, Sophia Winslow continued to support Marcus every step of the way. When she heard about the Bright Futures Initiative, she was thrilled. You've turned an act of kindness into a movement, Marcus, she said during one of their phone calls. That's something to be proud of. Sophia also introduced Marcus to a network of philanthropists and community leaders who were eager to help. Through her connections, Marcus secured a small grant that allowed him to purchase better supplies and expand the program to include more kids. One day, Sophia surprised Marcus by showing up at the community center during a group session. The kids were busy working on their assignments when Sophia walked in, carrying a large box of brand new laptops. I thought these might come in handy, she said with a wink. The room erupted into cheers. For many of the kids, it was their first time using a computer. Marcus couldn't thank Sophia enough, but she brushed off his gratitude. This is your program, Marcus, she said. I'm just here to support it. The ripple spreads. As the weeks turned into months, the Bright Futures Initiative began to transform the neighborhood. Kids who had once struggled in school started earning better grades. Parents who had felt powerless to help their children found hope in the program. Even the community center, which had once been underutilized, became a vibrant hub of learning and connection. Marcus found himself busier than ever, but he didn't mind. The work gave him a sense of purpose that made every late night and early morning worth it. He also began to see the broader impact of his efforts. One day, Diego came up to him after a session, clutching a report card with a wide grin. "Look, Marcus," he said, holding up the card. "I got all B's and 1 A. My teacher said I'm improving a lot." Marcus felt a lump rise in his throat. "That's amazing, Diego. I'm proud of you." Diego's smile faltered slightly. "It's because of you," he said quietly. "You believed in me when no one else did." A life-changing moment. One evening, as Marcus was wrapping up a session, Mrs. Latham approached him with an envelope. "This came for you," she said, her eyes shining with excitement. Marcus opened the envelope and found a letter inside. It was from a prestigious private high school in the city, offering him a full scholarship to attend. The letter explained that they had heard about his work with the Bright Futures Initiative and were impressed by his dedication and leadership. His heart raced as he read the words. A full scholarship. It was more than he had ever dreamed of. But as he looked around the room at the kids he was helping, he felt a pang of hesitation. Could he leave them behind? Sophia, who had been standing nearby, seemed to read his thoughts. "Marcus," she said gently, "this is an opportunity you've earned. And remember, leadership isn't about doing everything yourself. It's about building something that lasts, even when you're not there." Her words stayed with him as he talked it over with his mother later that night. She was adamant that he accept the scholarship. "You've worked so hard for this, Marcus," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "This is your chance to build a better future, not just for yourself, but for all of us." The decision wasn't easy, but Marcus eventually agreed. He began training a group of volunteers to take over the day-to-day operations of the Bright Futures Initiative. The program was no longer just his. It belonged to the community now. As he prepared to start a new chapter at his new school, Marcus couldn't help but reflect on how far he had come. What had started as a small act of kindness, a simple decision to give up his seat on a crowded bus, had grown into something extraordinary. It was proof that even the smallest actions could create ripples that changed lives. And Marcus knew his story was far from over. Building a legacy. The summer before Marcus began his journey at the prestigious private high school was a whirlwind of preparation, transition, and reflection. While packing his things and preparing for the new chapter, he felt the weight of responsibility for the legacy he was leaving behind. The Bright Futures Initiative was no longer just an idea. It had become a vital part of the community, and Marcus wanted to ensure its sustainability. Training the next leaders. Marcus knew he couldn't run the program while attending a rigorous school miles away. With the help of Mrs. Latham, Sophia Winslow, and the dedicated volunteers who had joined the initiative, Marcus began training a team of new leaders. Diego, now a confident young teenager, was one of the first to step up. "I want to help, Marcus," he said one afternoon. "You've done so much for me. I want to do the same for other kids." Marcus smiled, clapping him on the shoulder. "That's exactly the kind of attitude we need, Diego. You've got what it takes." Marcus spent hours teaching Diego and a few other older students how to organize tutoring sessions, manage schedules, and handle communication with parents. He also worked with Mrs. Latham to establish a clear structure for the program, complete with guidelines for volunteers and a plan for tracking students' progress. Sophia played a pivotal role, helping Marcus secure additional funding through grants and donations. She even introduced him to a local nonprofit organization that agreed to partner with the Bright Futures Initiative, providing access to more resources and training opportunities. "Your program is becoming something much bigger than you imagined, Marcus," Sophia said during one of their meetings. "That's what happens when you build something with heart." A farewell celebration. Before Marcus left for school, the community center organized a farewell celebration in his honor. The event was a testament to how much Marcus had impacted the neighborhood. Families, teachers, and volunteers filled the room, bringing homemade dishes, heartfelt cards, and warm smiles. Mrs. Latham stood at the podium to deliver a speech. When Marcus first walked into this center with his big ideas and even bigger heart, "I knew he was special," she said, her voice steady with pride. "But what he's done here has exceeded all our expectations. He's not just a leader, he's an inspiration." As she spoke, Marcus sat in the front row, his heart swelling with a mix of emotions. He felt pride, gratitude, and a bittersweet sadness at leaving behind the people and the place that had become so much a part of his life. When it was his turn to speak, Marcus walked to the podium, his hands trembling slightly. He looked out at the crowd, at Diego, his mother, Sophia, and so many others who had supported him along the way. "I don't even know where to start," he began, his voice cracking slightly. "When I started tutoring kids in my building, I wasn't trying to create a program or make a difference. I was just trying to help. But what I've learned is that even the smallest actions can grow into something bigger than you ever imagined." He paused, looking at his mother, who smiled through tears. "I couldn't have done any of this without my mom," he continued. "She taught me what it means to work hard and care for others, even when things aren't easy. And I couldn't have done it without all of you, this community." The crowd erupted into applause, and as Marcus stepped down from the podium, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. He wasn't saying goodbye. He was passing the torch. A new beginning. Marcus's first day at the private high school was overwhelming but exciting. The campus was sprawling, filled with modern classrooms, well-stocked libraries, and facilities he had only seen in movies. It was a world away from the small, underfunded school he had attended before, but Marcus was determined to make the most of the opportunity. In his first week, he joined the school's leadership club, where he shared his experiences with the Bright Futures Initiative. His story resonated with his peers and teachers, many of whom expressed interest in supporting the program or volunteering during their free time. One teacher, Ms. Carmichael, approached Marcus after a meeting. "Marcus, your story is incredible," she said. "Have you ever thought about expanding your program to other communities?" The idea stunned him. "Expanding? I'm not sure how I'd even start." Ms. Carmichael smiled. "One step at a time. You've already laid the groundwork. With the right support, there's no limit to what you can achieve." The first expansion. Inspired by Ms. Carmichael's encouragement, Marcus began researching ways to replicate the Bright Futures Initiative in other neighborhoods. He reached out to Sophia Winslow, who immediately offered her support. "This is exactly the kind of vision I was hoping you'd develop," Sophia said during one of their calls. "Let's start small. Focus on 1 or 2 communities where the need is greatest. I'll connect you with people who can help." With Sophia's connections and the support of his school's leadership club, Marcus launched a pilot program in a neighboring community. He worked closely with local leaders to adapt the initiative to their unique needs, using the lessons he had learned from his own neighborhood as a guide. The pilot program faced its share of challenges: recruiting volunteers, securing funding, and earning the trust of the community. But Marcus tackled each obstacle with determination. By the end of the first year, the program had helped over 50 students improve their grades and gain confidence in their abilities. A growing legacy. As Marcus continued his education, the Bright Futures Initiative grew into a network of programs serving multiple communities. Each location had its own team of dedicated leaders, many of whom had been inspired by Marcus's story. The program became a symbol of what could be achieved through kindness, determination, and a commitment to uplifting others. By the time Marcus graduated from high school, he had not only secured a full scholarship to a top university, but also built a legacy that would outlive him. His tutoring program had transformed the lives of hundreds of students, and its ripple effect was still spreading. Looking ahead, on the night of his high school graduation, Marcus stood on the rooftop of his apartment building, gazing out at the city that had shaped him. His mother joined him, her belly now flat, and her face glowing with health and pride. "You've come so far, Marcus," she said softly. "But I know this is just the beginning." Marcus nodded, his mind filled with dreams of the future. "It is, Mom. And I'm ready for whatever comes next." As the stars sparkled above them, Marcus felt a deep sense of peace. His journey had been far from easy, but it had taught him the power of resilience, compassion, and community. And he knew that as long as he kept those values close, the legacy he had built would continue to grow, one ripple at a time. As Marcus prepared to leave for university, his reflection on the rooftop that night became a moment of quiet determination. His story had begun with a simple act of kindness, and now his efforts had grown into a movement that transformed lives. But he knew his work was far from over. University and new horizons. At university, Marcus majored in education and business, a dual path that allowed him to combine his passion for teaching with the skills needed to expand the Bright Futures Initiative. The campus environment was a world apart from the struggles of his childhood, but Marcus never let himself forget where he had come from. His mother's sacrifices and the faces of the children he'd helped were the fuel that kept him moving forward. Sophia Winslow remained a steadfast mentor, regularly checking in and connecting him with opportunities. She encouraged him to think bigger, and with her help, Marcus began working on a plan to scale his initiative on a national level. During his sophomore year, Marcus gave his first public speech at a conference for young leaders. Standing before an audience of hundreds, he told the story of the day he gave up his seat on the bus. The audience listened intently as he described how that small act of kindness had set off a chain reaction, changing not only his life, but the lives of many others. "I believe in the power of small actions," Marcus said, his voice steady and confident, "because one small action can ripple outward, touching lives in ways we can't even imagine. My goal is to create a world where every child has the tools and support they need to succeed, no matter where they come from." The speech earned him a standing ovation and opened new doors for partnerships and funding. Organizations reached out to him, offering resources and connections to help grow the Bright Futures Initiative. Marcus knew this was his chance to take the program to the next level, a national movement. By the time Marcus graduated from university, the Bright Futures Initiative had expanded to serve communities across the state. His team of dedicated volunteers and local leaders had grown, and the program was now helping thousands of students each year. With the help of Sophia and other mentors, Marcus established a nonprofit organization to oversee the initiative. The nonprofit provided a framework for local chapters, ensuring each program had access to training, resources, and support. Marcus traveled frequently, visiting communities, meeting with volunteers, and sharing his story to inspire others. One of the most rewarding moments came during a visit to a chapter in a small town. As Marcus walked into the community center, he was greeted by a young girl named Aisha. She ran up to him, clutching a folder filled with her schoolwork. "Mr. Marcus," she said, her eyes shining with excitement, "I got an A in math. I never thought I could do it, but my tutor helped me so much." Marcus knelt down to her level, smiling warmly. "That's amazing, Aisha. I'm so proud of you. Keep working hard, okay?" Aisha nodded eagerly, and Marcus felt a familiar sense of fulfillment. Moments like this reminded him why he had started the initiative in the first place. Returning home. Years later, Marcus returned to his old neighborhood for a special event. The community center, once a modest and underused space, had been transformed into a vibrant hub of learning and activity. A large banner outside read, "The Bright Futures Center, dedicated to Marcus James." Marcus's mother, now retired and enjoying her role as a grandmother, stood beside him, tears in her eyes. "You've done something incredible, Marcus," she said, her voice trembling with pride. "This is your legacy." Inside the center, familiar faces from the neighborhood greeted him warmly. Diego, now a college student and one of the program's most passionate leaders, took the stage to give a speech. "Marcus believed in me when I didn't believe in myself," Diego said, his voice steady and confident. "And now, because of him, I get to pass that belief on to others." That's what the Bright Futures Initiative is all about, lifting each other up, one step at a time. The crowd erupted into applause, and Marcus couldn't help but feel overwhelmed by the love and support surrounding him. He had started with nothing but a desire to help, and now he was witnessing the impact of his efforts in ways he had never imagined. A legacy that lives on. As Marcus walked through the bustling center, he paused to watch a group of children working on their homework. One of the volunteers, a young girl who reminded him of himself at that age, was patiently explaining a math problem to a classmate. The sight filled him with hope. He realized then that the Bright Futures Initiative was no longer just his. It belonged to everyone who had been touched by it. From the volunteers to the students to the communities it served, the ripple effect of his kindness had grown into a wave, creating opportunities and inspiring change far beyond what he could have envisioned. As he stepped outside into the warm evening air, Marcus looked up at the stars, the same ones he had gazed at years ago on his apartment rooftop. Back then, he had dreamed of a better future. Now he was living it, and helping others to do the same. The legacy of the Bright Futures Initiative was one of resilience, compassion, and the power of small actions to create lasting change. And Marcus knew that as long as there were people willing to lift each other up, the ripples would continue to spread, shaping a brighter world for generations to come.